Well, I'm delighted to be joined today by Hanneke Farrand in an exceptionally sunny Isle of Man. Welcome, Hanneke.
Morning, David. Thank you for being here.
So terrific to chat with you today. We first met at a PCD event down in Cape Town, but for those who've not had the chance to meet you before, it'd be really interesting just to hear a little bit more about your background and the kind of clients you work with.
Yes, thank you, David. At the time we met, I was still a tax partner at quite a big law firm in South Africa, in a very secure, stable environment, pre-COVID. And since then, as you know, I've relocated here. We're very close to my home now. I've started my own boutique law firm, cross-border tax and trust practice. And myself and my children moved here in the middle of COVID on our own.
Wow.
I think we said about 19 months ago. And here we are, my house is down the road. So this is my local beach.
So the type of intermediaries you might work with here would be the local fiduciaries or the banks. Give us a sense of the type of intermediaries you interact with.
That's right. Largely corporate service providers here, other law firms as well, and the banks that are here. And as you know, it's not only limited to the Isle of Man, it's also service providers in the other islands and in London. So it's a fantastic spread.
Great.
Of people that we make contact with.
So you did make that relocation in these extraordinary times. I mean, perhaps give us a sense of how that transition has been. What have you found the best thing about it, to start off with?
The best thing about it is just being able to have a fresh start in a new environment. I've always said to my children, this is just an adventure, you know, and let's embrace it and see where it takes us. They're now 15 and 17, so they were remarkable. You know, they honestly, I always say they were the heroes of the story. Yeah. Because what I've learned is that teenagers are adjustable, much more than we are, to be honest. You know, there are a few rocky moments, but it's amazing. You know, once they've made their friends, you know, my daughter's got a job, they get the bus, they use the local taxi cabs, you know, I go away, they're at home. You know, it's a very, very different environment from what we were used to living in South Africa. Yeah. Not necessarily good or bad, it's just different.
Yeah. And did you have any links to the island before you made the move, or were you coming really with a very blank canvas?
Largely blank.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had two clients whose family offices were based here, and the hotel I stayed in was just down the road here on the prom. Yes. So I'd been here a couple of times. Okay. But it's very different to run up and down in the prom, you know, for like 3 or 4 days at a time, as opposed to actually moving here.
Absolutely. And you just found a property here in Douglas, so you're really putting roots down now.
Yes. Yeah, there's no turning back.
Terrific.
Not without great expense. No, we're here.
And as we said on the top, you're a specialist South African tax and legal advisor. Be great to hear just your experience on what you think the latest trends are amongst that client base.
Yes, from a South African perspective, and I find, so I always say we need to take it back to the, say, late 80s, early 90s. You know, we were talking about the days where you could transport cash and gold and jewelry in a suitcase. You know, then it became more formalized. You know, we're setting up offshore trusts. Then we had, you know, quite a few immigrations, like South Africans moving abroad. So those were like the trends in the years that I've practiced. But what I do now, which is probably the most exciting bit that I've done, is you actually help to globalize South African businesses. So, you know, my clients have already done the hard yards. They've got the trusts, by and large. They've got the offshore structures. They've got their advisors. The children have probably relocated, some of them at least. But now what you see is, and maybe it's a post-COVID thing where people have just understand that it is quite possible to run a business remotely. If you think about it, that's exactly what I've done. You know, my team is in South Africa, but I'm here because you can operate on Zoom. So what I do now and what the trend is, and I see what clients want, South African clients want, is to be able to establish a global footprint.
So it's freed people up in their thinking in terms of this remote working on a consistent basis.
Exactly, and open markets. And obviously being based here or in any of the other northern islands, it is, especially if you want to operate into Europe or the UK, for example, or the States. You know, there are always some complexities in it, but it's a very nice hub to have your business for expansion because it's got a good regulatory environment. you know, it's a known environment that you operate in, and it's, you know, we were talking about the proximity to South Africa, and you know, it's an overnight flight, maybe not that close, but easily accessible. So that works well from that perspective.
Do you see other locations as well being popular for relocation? Like I see a lot of Dubai, South Africa connectivity, or like you say to the US. Do you see it sort of across the piece? There's many different locations that people like to go.
I would say probably what I see most is the UK, to be honest, truth be told. Maybe it's just because what I see because I'm based here. US is also very, very popular. Netherlands I've seen. I'm just trying to think what currently is, you know, is in my mind. And you will see the Isle of Man, credit to the government, they really want to attract businesses and families to come and live here. So I see that as well, you know.
And in terms of tax legislation in South Africa, are there things that people in the offshore and international space should be aware of? I think I've seen recently more disclosure initiatives from the government. What's the latest there?
Yes, look, what has changed significantly in the last couple of years, it was just the automatic exchange of information, everything that goes with the common reporting standards, you know, complete transparency in relation to who the founders are of a structure, who the funders are, even who the protectors are, your ultimate beneficial owners, beneficiaries. I mean, it's not new in this market, but I find there's still some groundwork to be covered in the South African market. And I haven't seen the implementation myself yet of the exchange of information and the Revenue Service starting to ask questions. But I think, you know, we're in for a tough run when that starts happening.
I guess the feeling that information is there, it's documented, it's on a database somewhere, is almost sufficient for people to say, right, you know, it's not credible to do anything else.
Exactly, you have to get it right.
And do you think also beneficiaries are more aware of their rights on trust structures? We were chatting about that earlier, that actually they have access to information about what they might be entitled to. So how do you see that playing out?
Yes, it's an awareness of that we are entitled to see information, we are entitled to ask questions, we hold the trustees more accountable. And you know, I see it even in a divorce case. You know, it's not only tax. You know, we come from a tax environment where we think, you know, it's all about revenue audits and, you know, outstanding tax liabilities. We forget that there's a whole host of other things that one needs to keep an eye on. So I see quite a bit of it in divorce matters that I advise on, trying to pierce through the trust and for the soon-to-be ex-spouse to have some claim against the trust. And then if your governance wasn't right, it's a long road. Because
divorce is a major threat to wealth. I mean, people might look at how investments performed and be dismayed if there's a fluctuation, but actually a divorce can fundamentally erode capital.
Absolutely. No, it does. Not can. Yeah, it generally does.
And what about for investment back into South Africa? So if you've got foreign investors looking at making investments there, is there anything particular that they should be thinking about on this trend of globalization and expansion? There might be companies from the UK going the other way, looking at South Africa. How do you help advise them?
I see that, and the same thing. In fact, I was looking at it this morning. It's just an awareness of the regulatory environment. You know, competition law matters. You know, for example, you know, it crops up long before you think about it. Then obviously South Africa has exchange control. Now, you know, foreigners can always take money out, but just make sure that your processes are in place so that you can do that. But you know, the same commercial considerations that you have the other way around. That's the beauty of what we do. You know, it's one skill set that is actually that applies across borders, which is interesting.
And you're frequently working with advisors in other locations, so I imagine the UK crops up a lot across Europe. Are there certain locations in which you're often dealing?
Yeah. UK, Switzerland as well, quite a lot. Netherlands a bit, and the States and the US. That's just where I typically find where South Africans have, you know, established their feet, their roots.
And you've been travelling continuously, really, not through the pandemic, but you've already made a number of trips down to South Africa to see clients and colleagues and things like that. Do you look forward to now travel opening up and more people being interested in meeting together? And the ease of travel is coming back, isn't it?
Yes, Yes, I appointed an associate during COVID, and she'd work with me for about a year, and suddenly I saw her three-dimensionally. It was that type of thing. Well, I did a presentation, in fact, it was for Jersey Finance, and it was initially I needed to. I got so used to presenting on webinars, and then suddenly you see people in real life again. It took me a second to recalibrate my brain again. People actually look back at you.
No, it's great to be back in the person with people, and we're looking forward to coming to South Africa, Johannesburg for the first time, and Cape Town in December. So, well, wonderful to talk to you today, Hanneke. I hope to see you in South Africa at the end of the year.
I'm looking forward to that, and thank you for your time.
The latest technical content delivered through global conversations with professionals for professionals.